Welcome to Hashtag No Limits. I am your host, Shelley Kino, and Hashtag No Limits is about people who society places limits upon, but who are busting through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, "We know who we are, but not who we will be." And I believe that to be 100% true, and that there is not a better or more beautiful example than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. For those who don't know, a very simplified and short version of what happens is that the caterpillar literally dissolves into its cells, and just when it must think its life is over, it is reformed into the butterfly. But it's not finished struggling. It still has to find its way out of the cocoon in order to make its wings strong enough for it to soar everywhere that it is going to go once it gets out of that cocoon. That can't be easy, but neither is busting through the limits that society places upon us. And I love to bring people on that are providing opportunities, programming, apps, products, whatever it is, to help those who are busting through those limits. And that is what my guest is going to talk about today. But before I bring him on, I just want to remind you to please like, subscribe, and hit that notification button if you haven't already done so. And if you are watching live, give us a hashtag live. And if you are watching in the replay, give us a hashtag replay. And in both instances, tell us where you're watching from. It's always interesting to know where everyone is joining us. And so without further ado, I am going to bring on my guest, Adam, and my thing is being weird, so I was distracted there. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. That was a beautiful and generous introduction. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, you are very welcome. So, Adam, you and I met at a conference of a couple of months ago, and I was fascinated by what your product is. And so before we get to that, though, go ahead and tell us who you are and kind of a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, my name's Adam Sparks. I was a 6th through 12th grade English and social studies teacher for 7 years in Illinois, where we met. So I taught in Chicago for a few years on the west side of Chicago. I'm from Nebraska, so I taught in rural schools there. I taught in China for a year, so taught English and social studies in wildly varied contexts for 7 years. And then 3 years ago now, I went to grad school full-time at Stanford in their Learning Design and Technology program. And in that program, you spend a year trying to solve a problem in education using technology. And as someone who had taught in the humanities for a while, I'd experienced a lot of problems. The one that I wanted to work on was, chose to work on was, how do we get kids to think about the feedback that we provide them on the work that they do? Because it was an ever-present challenge of, first of all, just to get them the feedback, but then you hand it back to them and they ignore it and look at their grade and move on. So that was the goal. And what was supposed to be my master's project became a startup when we won some grant funding during my grad program. So it's now called Short Answer, and we help through 12th grade students write better together through social writing activities that are built to work across the curriculum. We've been building it for about the last 3 years now. And it's one of the joys of the job is getting to go to conferences around the country and share it with educators. And that's where you and I met at the Illinois Reading Council conference in Springfield a couple months ago. So, and it leads to fun things like this. So love what I do and love what we're building at Short Answer. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for you to share about it. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about some of your backstory. So teaching in, you said China for a year?
Yeah, it's supposed to be 2. It turned into 1. But yeah, I taught in China for a year.
And did you teach Americans at American bases? Who were the students that you were working with?
Great question. No, so we taught in an international school that was connected to a public school in Hengyang, which is the second largest city in Hunan province, which is southern China. So it was all Chinese students, but the subsection of students that we worked with were Chinese students that were hoping and planning to go to college internationally. So they wanted a extra emphasis, of course, on English, and they wanted all their instruction in English. So we worked part-time in that international school and then part-time in the public school teaching oral English, which is a very specific type of English. It's very different from what you would normally see in like a K-12 classroom in the United States, because it's focused almost exclusively on pronunciation and speaking and oral English. So it was a wild experience. I learned a lot teaching in a teaching in a classroom of 100% English language learners was a new experience for me.
Right.
And so I definitely learned a lot, both from that experience, but also just from a cultural perspective. It was fascinating to experience the differences in the ways that Chinese communities and parents approach education compared to the way American communities and parents approach education. So I learned a lot culturally too. It was a great experience.
Okay, well, now you piqued my interest. Now I want to know some of the differences between the two countries, especially as it relates to education.
Oh man, I mean, we could talk about that for the next 6 hours. So I'll try to keep this succinct. And I also need to do the qualifier of China is a country of, well, I think, oh man, I'm going to butcher, I think 1.6 billion people.
Yeah, it's huge.
So I don't want to pretend like my experience somehow summarizes all of that, because obviously it's bigger than my experience. But in my experience, the thing that was most fascinating was the onus of control. What I mean by that is what I experienced in Chinese education was the expectation is on the student and the parent to educate their child. That's who's responsible for their outcomes. And I think my experience teaching in the United States was it's the responsibility of the teacher and the school to educate the student. And it's primarily their responsibility. And that leads to very different experiences, and some healthy and some unhealthy. But culturally, I think that was the biggest difference, is like Chinese parents viewed it as their responsibility and their students' responsibility to succeed in school and to learn things. And I think in American culture, many of the schools I worked at, it's the school's job to educate my student. It's not mine. It's the teacher's job to educate my student. It's not mine. And if my student fails in a class, I'm talking in America now, it's probably the teacher's fault, or it's probably the school's fault. It's probably not my student's fault.
Right.
That cultural difference plays out in a myriad of many, many different ways and facets and things. That's fascinating, because there's pros and cons to both of those perspectives. And again, caveat, I'm painting with a very broad brush. I don't necessarily think that encapsulates all American parents and all Chinese parents.
Right.
But that was the biggest one that I noticed for sure. And it kind of makes sense also, just like the classrooms that I taught in, we're talking like average class size was 60 kids. So of course it's going to be a heck of a lot more of your responsibility as a student to succeed, because there's just a lot less one-on-one time with the teacher. So it almost felt more, teaching in China almost felt more like what college classes feel like here in the United States. Like there were office hours after class where if you have questions, you go in and you work one-on-one then. It's not really something you do in class, because there's like 60, 70 kids in the classroom, right? It's harder to do the individual instruction. So we could talk about that for a lot more time, but like just succinctly, I'd say that's the biggest cultural difference.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And it sounds then sort of I don't know if it's a byproduct, but that parents are more involved with their children, with the school environment, trying to, make sure that they are being successful in helping their student be successful as a student.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting. It's like, yes and no. The kids are at school a heck of a lot more, at least at the school we taught at in China. Like the school days are longer. But I think the biggest form that it takes is once kids are out of school, parents are often paying for tutoring. Like we've worked at a school in Taiwan for the last 3 summers, and I know Taiwan's a little different culturally, but similar. And they have this concept of cram school in Taiwan, which is like all this whole industry of like tutoring services that often build around schools. And then when you get done with school, then you go to cram school, because cram school is where you get prepared for the national exams. I don't know if many kids in American culture go into cram school once they get out of school at 3:30. In our culture, it's more you go do your extracurricular activity, or you don't go do more drills around like reading and writing and math. So it's interesting the way it plays out.
So you said they go longer. They have a longer school day? Yeah.
And they also, the school I taught at, many of the students stayed at the school all week. So they slept at the school too. So it's like a boarding school situation, But the way it worked was, if I recall correctly, because this was almost 10 years ago now, but school day started about 8. You'd have class in the morning till lunch, which lunch was around noon, 12:30. And then you'd eat lunch, and kids would scarf down their lunch because after lunch you get nap time. That was another great cultural thing that I loved about teaching in China. So from about noon to about 1:32 in the afternoon, they had a break, whereas eat lunch and then go nap or just chill, but take a break.
For all ages, they took naps?
I taught at a high school. So these were high school students.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was nap time. And then after 2:00, so we go from 2 to about 5:00 or 6:00 roughly, you have classes. And then they have break for dinner. And then after dinner, they come back to class, and it's not class anymore. So this is like from 7:00 roughly to like 9:30. I could be getting these times wrong, but generally structured. Then you do independent study time, and your head teacher's at the front of the room kind of working, but otherwise you're just at your desk doing work. And I think part of independent study time was a way of just managing kids, that because they're sleeping at your school, like it's a good way to have the productive time. But yeah, what that results in is kids being in school more or less from 8 in the morning till 10:00 at night, 5 days a week.
Right.
And they do manage energy well within that. You get a nap, you get breaks, you get, PE and things. But yeah, it's pretty intense. It's pretty intense.
Yeah. And I can definitely, in my area specifically, the area where I am is very heavy athletics. And, the competition between schools on the football teams, the basketball teams, the volleyball teams. And I could just imagine if I suggested that to the parents in my area that, nope, we don't have extracurriculars anymore because there's no time for it. They'd be like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah, it's different, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a big cultural difference is we put a lot more emphasis in American schools around extracurriculars. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I think extracurriculars are a great outlet for kids to figure out what they're passionate about and who they are. Right. And that goes to this larger cultural difference about identity and individualism versus the collective, serving the collective community in East Asian culture, but especially in Chinese culture. So there are broad cultural patterns at play here that are manifesting themselves in the way schools are structured, I think.
Right. That's so interesting. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm sure that was not at all what you thought we were going to discuss.
No, this is great. I haven't gotten to talk about this in a long time. This is great.
So now I'm curious, because you said then when you came back and you went to, was it Stanford?
So I came back from China, taught in Chicago for a couple years, fell in love. Well, actually I taught in Nebraska and then went to Chicago, and then fell in love with ed tech and wanted to build it, but didn't have the skills. So applied while I was teaching to go to grad school, and got in and went to Stanford in 2021 and was there for a year and a half. But then my wife also did her master's in data science at Stanford. So we ended up living in the Bay Area in Palo Alto for about 4 years.
Okay, perfect. And so in this program that you were in, you said you had to solve a problem. So in education, so did any of what you experienced from your time in China play into the problem that you chose to solve, or was that strictly based from your time in Nebraska and Chicago?
It mostly came from my experience in American classrooms, but I do think the Chinese experience did play into it a little bit, because the practical problem was I spend my Sunday giving kids feedback on their writing. I come in Monday, I give them that feedback. They ignore all of it. They look at their grade and jam it in their backpack and move on. So just like, how do we get them to think about the feedback? But if you peel that back and sort of do the 5 why thing, where you ask why 5 times, the larger issue was something that was just as present in China as it was here. And that's kids caring more about grades than learning, and caring more about that measure than the actual outcome that you care about, right? So it's like, who cares if I learn anything in social studies? As long as I get an A, I have been successful. That's just as present, if not more present, in China as it is in here in the United States, in what I experienced. But that's the larger issue. And then again, manifests itself in a lot of ways, but one being ignoring feedback. So that's the one that we wanted to work on, with the hope maybe of addressing the larger problem of caring more about grades and learning. I'm not going to pretend like any one tool is going to solve that. That's a larger issue, and structurally and culturally in the United States. But yeah, that was definitely present in every school I taught at, regardless of context.
And I think, unfortunately, it's not just the student who just wants those grades. Our society has become so much grade centered that even, I mean, as educators across the country, we get rated on what scores, and they're not grades, but they're kind of grades in a sense, on these standardized tests that our students take. And so I'm not sure where exactly the shift happened, but I hear parents tell me frequently, I want my kid to get straight A's. Or they don't say it, but their actions show it. And I started several years ago asking parents, what does it mean if your child is on the high honor roll? Well, they got straight A's. Okay, what does that mean? What do you mean? What does that mean? They know what they're talking about. I'm like, do they?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they got A's? Did they learn anything?
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, that whole feedback piece. I even have a chapter in my book of a student named Linus, and his mom talked about the fact that he was that student who really wanted that feedback. And then he would take that feedback and he would try to learn the material or write better, whatever the feedback was regarding. And in one instance, his brain, all cylinders were firing really well for a particular subject. And he was studying every night for the whole week, just like he normally would do, so that he could learn the material, not just have it memorized to be able to spit it out. Yeah. He took the test. He felt really good about it. He came back in on Monday to get his test result. His teacher said, I don't know how the only way you got this B is because you cheated. I didn't see you cheat, but the only way you got this B is because you cheated.
Wow.
And right? And yeah. Even with that, he took that test home and he and his mom worked through the material until he felt that he had actually learned what he was supposed to learn from that subject material.
Yeah.
And he didn't just go, oh, I got a B. Yay, me. I'm excited. I got a B, and move on.
Right.
It was, well, I want to learn it.
Yeah.
And we have, that's such a great point that we have gone away from what am I learning to my grades, because my grades, again, going back to extracurriculars, I have to maintain a certain grade point average or a certain letter grade in all classes. I think most schools now have it where you can't be failing any one class.
Right.
But overall, then your GPA has to be whatever they set their parameters at their school. So you're right. I think so many kids don't care, just as long as they got whatever keeps them eligible for whatever extracurricular they might want to be involved in.
Yep. It's just a box to check. And it's disappointing, and there are many flaws with it. It leads to kids being passed along in a system with gaps in their understanding, because it's like, okay, you got a C in freshman English, so you're good to go on to sophomore English. And it's like, well, wait a second. Like, you got to let's pretend that's a 75%. That means there's 25% of the content of this class that you have not showed understanding of. What happens if that 25% is critical, as it often is, especially in content that builds on itself, like world languages or in math class or whatever? What happens when that is critical for your understanding in the next course? How much does that hold you back? And I think a lot. Right. And I experienced that. Teaching on the west side of Chicago is the most difficult job I have ever had and probably will ever have. And a big part of the reason it was so difficult was I had sophomores in high school walking into my classroom that were reading at a fourth grade level, and it's like, I'm here and I'm here for you, and I'm willing and ready to take on that challenge. But how in the world did we get to a place as an education system where we're consistently producing high school students that are reading at levels that are nowhere near where they should be. And I think there are many factors that play with that. Of course, I think maybe one of an important one within that is this grade structure that we've set up where we move kids along when there's large gaps in their understanding. And there's some really cool programs that I found that when I taught in Chicago that I thought really addressed them. One of them I'll give a shout out to. I don't work for them, but I just love what they do. It's called the Modern Classrooms Project, and they do really great differentiation for kids through a model of self-pacing, where kids move through curriculum at their own pace, and they only can move on when they've demonstrated mastery of whatever content you're teaching. So it's getting away from like, all right, you got an 80% good enough, moving on to like, no, prove to me that you know everything, and then we'll move on to the next thing. And you're able to do that because every kid's self-paced. So that's called the Modern Classrooms Project. I would encourage your audience to check it out. I love what they do.
Yeah, that's really cool. I may have to check them out and see if they would like to come on and do what you're doing today. So kind of not really shifting gears, but a little bit of, okay, so we have freshmen, sophomores, juniors coming in, and they're in their literature classes, or they're in their whatever classes requiring them to write an essay or write some sort of an answer other than just a fill in the blank or a matching situation. And now we have AI. So how are those two things, or are they blending together?
Yeah. What do we do with AI and writing instruction?
Yes.
Huge question, really challenging. I don't even know where to start. I think you start as an educator. If you're teaching writing, it's got to start with policy. I know that's not a sexy answer, but it's I think an obvious one. So in your syllabus, I think you need clear communication with your students around what your expectations are. For me, a system that I really like is a simple stoplight labeling system. Red, yellow, green. If the assignment's labeled red, you cannot use AI. Here's why. If it's labeled yellow, you can use some AI with specific constraints. Here's those constraints. If it's labeled green, I want you, not only can you use AI, I want you to, and part of what I'm measuring is your ability to use it effectively. So a simple labeling system for a policy is something I like. That's not going to prevent kids from using AI, but it's at least going to encourage dialogue between teacher and student around usage, because kids are using it regardless of if we want them to or not. So I think living in reality and just accepting that reality is a useful first step forward. And then the challenge becomes, well, how do you enforce that? If I set a red level expectation of, I don't want you using AI, how do I enforce that? Or on the other end of the spectrum, if I'm going to say green and I want you to, what does effective AI use look like? Like that's a whole question too. I guess a couple of things, and I could talk about this for a long time, but I think structurally what it means is we need to think about assessment through the lens of layering, where any one layer that you come up with to assess a student's understanding of a content is going to have holes in it like a piece of Swiss cheese. But where one layer might have a hole, another layer might not. And so if you stack the layers, you eventually block all of the holes, if that makes sense. This is a Swiss cheese model that I'm borrowing from Dr. Kyoto Rundle and Philip Dawson and their assessment and sort of reframing of academic integrity, and how do we go about assessing kids in a world where machines can do almost any task that we assign them. So I think that layering mentality is really helpful in the context of writing. And then what those layers might look like are going to depend on your task, but some simple layers might be doing more in-class writing, doing more peer conferencing and one-on-one conversations with kids where they have to discuss and defend what they wrote and sort of talk off the cuff about what they've written as a way of thinking through what they wrote, but also as a way of almost as like a PhD dissertation defense of like proving to you that they wrote what they wrote. I think that could also take the form of more in-class presentations where you're talking through your process of what you wrote. There are any number of things that we can do, and that's partly why we're building Short Answer the way that we're building it. So Short Answer is built for short form writing practice that's intended to take place in class because you could, for the simple reason that you can monitor AI's influence on the student's process as a result of doing it in class. So that's a big part of what we try to do with short answer. And then another big structural change that we're trying to help promote is more writing across the curriculum, because we do think AI is going to result in kids getting less writing practice because it's going to write for them, as you kind of hinted at. So,
Right.
So it can't just be on the English teacher to do all the writing instruction anymore. It needs to be embedded across the curriculum. And so we've tried to create short answer in a way that we're combining daily formative assessment of whatever content a teacher is teaching with writing, so that they're doing their assessment through writing to increase those practice reps intentionally across the curriculum. So that's a long-winded way of maybe of responding to your question. We could talk a lot more about it if you would like to, but that's how I think about setting a policy, communicating it, and then structuring your assessment in a way that I think will be able to realistically respond to some of the challenges of AI.
No, you answered it beautifully, and you did exactly what I had hoped with my, what I had hoped you would do with the question was you brought over my short answer. And so that is why I brought you on today, is because of this program that you and your wife have created, right? Because it was your wife that helped you.
Exactly. Yep. Alexa Sparks. She's brilliant and never gets to come on these things. And I take all the credit because I'm the public facing person, but yeah, she coded it, and she's brilliant. She has a background in education and data science, so I couldn't do it without her. She's awesome.
That's awesome. So kudos to your wife. You said Alexa Sparks? Yeah,
Alexa. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, since we brought short answer into it, of course, now go ahead and explain how it works, because I thought it was really cool when you showed me the demo of it at that conference a couple of months ago. And I know we're not showing the actual demo, but you'll do a brilliant job explaining it, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So it's a digital writing tool. A teacher will create a writing prompt and share it with the class. So sharing it with the class just means like pulling up a code, and the kids type in that code, and then it takes them through, and we take over their screen to help them focus. And it's just, here's your writing prompt, go ahead and do your response. And it's really intended for maybe 1 to 3 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs being the max. It's not really intended for like longer form, like essays and things, at least not yet. It's just short form writing, because again, intended to embed in your content area. So, and in class. So teacher shares code, students do their writing and submit it. And then once the teacher has all writing, they click begin feedback. And then we have a variety of activities, but in all of them, kids are getting feedback either from their peers. So we do peer-to-peer feedback. And I'm happy to talk about how we structure that to make it productive, because I know peer feedback can be a challenge. Or we use AI feedback, and we provide feedback based on the success criteria that's been preset by the teacher. And so the students get that feedback, they reflect on it, they discuss it. And then we show results, and the results depend on the activity. So for example, and we have an activity called Quick Write, where the students submit, and in that one, then they get AI feedback for each of the success criteria. And then the game of that one is we tally up all the results, and as a class, we're trying to hit a score goal together based on the proficiency that we all hit with our writing within those success criteria. So the big payoff at the end is like, there's a ball moving towards a flag at the top of the screen. It's like, are we going to hit the flag or not? And then if we don't, we can revise and resubmit. And I think that's one of the really cool affordances of AI specifically, is like you can get kids multiple rounds of feedback in a small amount of time to really get them using it in ways that was prior to AI really challenging, because you'd have this longer process of turning in the work. I, as a teacher, have to sit there, read through it all. Hopefully I can get it back to you in a day or 2, but probably more like 3 or 4. And so by the time I get you the feedback back, you don't even remember what we were working on. With this, it's like, I just did the task, and now I can get some feedback. And not only that, I can use the feedback to revise my whatever I'm working on, and hopefully improve even within that sitting or within that session. So that's the general structure. So it's do some writing, get feedback, reflect and discuss. And then hopefully that's a process by embedding across the curriculum. We increase the amount of reps at practice reps kids are getting to create cohesion in writing instruction across buildings and districts.
And I think that's so important that they get that feedback, and they know they're going to get feedback, and they're supposed to do something with that feedback. Because I think not only, like we talked about at the beginning of this, it's, I got a B, or I got an A, or I got a whatever grade, and I don't care. I'm done with it. And we've taken out the, okay, it's not perfect. It's supposed to be perfect. The whole concept of a draft and a rewrite and a revise, and you do that as many times as necessary to really hone in and say what you want to say. I mean, even myself writing the book and having an editor, reach out to me and say, okay, is this really what you meant when you said this? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, so I need to change that. Oh, did you really want to use this word? There's probably better words. You could use this word, or oh, right. Okay. Yeah. And it was 9 months of editing.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously that wasn't instant feedback like what you're talking about, but I love that it's that instant and they know, okay, I'm going to redo this and it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't look at these things as mistakes. You look at them as growing opportunities.
100%. Yeah. 100%. I think that's, yeah. And historically that was challenging to pull off for teachers because, okay, let's just go back to the way I did it when I was teaching. It's like you turned in all your work. I read through all of it. I gave you comments, handed it back to you. But it took me so long to get you that feedback and handing it back 5 days later. And here you go. Okay, you revise and resubmit. Now I'm going to do that again. It's going to take so all of a sudden, if as a teacher, I want to do multiple rounds of feedback and track their progress across different drafts, that's going to take me days, if not weeks, and a lot of work. And so just the nature of teaching is you don't have a whole lot of time. And so you have to be efficient. So naturally, those types of activities, you start to do less and less and less because you just don't have time for it. And I'm hoping one of the positive there are many negative, but of the positive affordances of AI, one of them can be, a reorientation towards process through our ability to track that growth over multiple rounds of feedback. And it gets tricky in there pedagogically because it's very doing feedback well is challenging. Feedback should cause thinking and should improve the writer just as much as the writing. And oftentimes when I see AI being used in the context of writing feedback, it's not great because it's so oriented towards just improving the product that the student doesn't have to think. It's basically just like, hey, you should get rid of this and copy paste this in. And the student's like, okay, sounds good. Boop, 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 done. And the product improves. And so we think the student improved. But there's a difference between performance on a task and real learning. And learning is a change in long-term memory or ability. And so it is still really tricky to do this stuff well. But I think the affordances of AI enable some really cool experiences that we're trying to tap into. Short answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it is, a lot of times when you're in the flow, you're in that creative, your mind is set. But like you said, when I went to school in the 1900s, 100 years ago, it was exactly what you're talking about, whether it was short answer or long form. And yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, okay, well, I don't even remember what was I thinking when I wrote this answer? What was the topic? And yeah, you have so many questions. And most of my classrooms, I only had maybe 20 or 25 kids in my classrooms with me. Now, granted, we had multiple classes of each grade level. So, that English teacher may still have 100 to 150 little short answer things to read or essays to read. But today we have so many teachers that have hundreds of students that they're trying to do that for and to try to get that back in a timely manner. And again, our society is so get it over with, get it done, put it behind me, move on to the next thing. Yeah. It does make it more difficult. So that was the AI help as part of the short answer. Talk about, and you said you would, so I'm holding you to it, the peer-to-peer. How does that work and what does that kind of look like?
Well, first I'll just say peer-to-peer is hard to do well. And I think any teacher listening to this knows that and knows why. Because it's oftentimes the blind leading the blind. It's like if the students don't understand the content, how can we expect them to provide quality feedback on work within that content? I mean, it's hard for professional teachers to provide good feedback. So the way that we've scaffolded it, and this grows out of research, specifically Scott Bartholomew, who's a researcher at BYU, and his research on comparative judgment for the use of formative assessment purposes. But it's if you scaffold peer feedback through the medium of comparison, kids can do it accurately and at a high level. And if you average multiple comparisons, the feedback is actually on par with that of an expert teacher. What I mean by scaffold through comparison is, okay, we're going to do peer feedback. We just submitted our writing. I click begin feedback. The student sees 2 anonymous pieces of peer writing on their screen. Anonymity is important in peer feedback. Okay, read this one. Okay, great. Now read this one. Okay, great. Which one is better based on our success criteria? So let's just pretend of these 2, which one has a better thesis statement? I think this one, not this one. Okay, great. Why? Tell me what this one did that the other one didn't, and explain it. If you scaffold it that way, kids can do it at a really high level. And when you take those comparisons and you average all of them, so if every kid in the class does 3 comparisons, and then we average all that feedback to kick out feedback reports to students, again, those feedback reports will be similar in quality to teacher feedback. And not only that, the kids learn so much more as a result of going through that process for a couple of reasons. First, they're being exposed to a bunch of different worked examples and having to really critically analyze those of like what makes for good writing, depending on whatever we're practicing. And I think that worked example effect is definitely at play. But just as importantly, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So just as important as the worked example effect is knowing when you're doing your writing that your classmates are going to see it. It's got that authentic audience built into it when you use peer feedback. And it's like, oh my gosh, it kind of puts you on the edge of your seat of like, my classmates are going to see what I write, so I better try hard. I better put some work into this. It's motivating, I think, for kids. And it's going to be anonymous, so it's safe, and it's I'm going to maintain my ego in all of this. But like, people are going to read it, so I should try hard. And I think there's some magic in that, especially in this new world, like you mentioned earlier, of like, how do we respond to AI in writing? And one of the big challenges is motivation of like, why is a student going to want to learn how to write if they can press a button and it'll write a paper for them in 10 seconds? And I think for me, one of the key motivators is that authentic audience piece of letting kids experience like, oh my gosh, writing is how I communicate who I am and what I believe to the world, and other people will read it. And it's pretty magical, and I think inherently engaging for kids. So we want to tap into that, but we want to do it in a way that's productive. And for us, that's scaffolding peer feedback through comparison. I'm happy to talk more about the comparative judgment research because I think comparative judgment is like a fascinating and underused pedagogical move in education, K-12 specifically. But that's how we scaffold peer feedback, in short answer.
We might get to that.
Yeah, no, we can talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, no. So I'm curious. So how long has this product been out?
Sorry. So publicly since 2020, spring of 2023. So coming up about 3 years. Okay.
And I'm a data nerd. And so do you have any data that says how well this is working? And have you found that it has side effects good side effects and negative, but more the good side that you didn't think, we didn't think about that this was also going to help that?
Yeah. So you're asking about efficacy, and the way that we've approached efficacy research at Short Answer is through the lens of a portfolio. And what I mean by that is we're trying to build out our understanding of our efficacy through small pieces of small measures that we build out over time in different contexts and in different places. And the reason for that is our product changes so much. And I'll give a perfect example of that. When we launched it, the reason we called it Short Answer was because we thought it was going to be a broad formative assessment tool that you use in any classroom, but specifically that's built to around peer-to-peer models of assessment, as I just kind of hinted at with comparative judgment. And then we put it into the hands of educators, and they were almost exclusively using it for writing practice. They were using it for assessment of daily tasks, but then it was a large percentage was like, we're using this for writing instruction. And so we just kind of followed our users down that path. It's like, well, if this is where you're finding value in it, how can we improve that use case to create a meaningful learning experience in your classroom? Mm-hmm. And so over the course of 3 years, we've really come to now focus almost exclusively on writing and find ways to embed writing across curriculum. But when we first launched it, we never would have imagined that that was the case. We would have thought it was going to be this more broad formative assessment tool, like I said. And so that's partly why we approach efficacy through this lens of a portfolio, because if we had run a randomized control trial on short answer in that first 6 months after we launched it, let's pretend, we could have found all these amazing findings and here's our effect size based on this research, et cetera, et cetera. But it would have been more or less meaningless now sitting here in 2026 because the product has changed so much. And there's pros and cons to that in ed tech in general. But it's partly why we take that portfolio lens. Now, to actually answer your question, we've done case studies on short answer where we've triangulated, and we've done this the last 2 years, and I'm in the process of doing it in this year. We've triangulated in-app survey data in combination with a more intentional survey that we mail out to our users in combination with unstructured interviews that we do with users. And 93% of teachers report better insight into student writing ability. 86% report better outcomes from students as a result of using short answer. Now, those are self-reported and survey data, so it's not actually based on objective measures. So it's obviously extremely limited research. But the fact that we've gotten those same results more or less 2 years running, and now we haven't published the case study this year, but I just sent out the survey 2 weeks ago, and it's looking even more positive now. Early indications and signs are that we are positively improving outcomes when it comes to writing and formative assessment in K-12 classrooms. We also are not naive and know that we know that we need more quasi-experimental and randomized control trial level studies to actually definitively show causal proof that we're improving outcomes. But again, that's something that we view as like we're working towards as we build this out over time. So you can, if you go to our website at myshortanswer.com, if you click our pedagogy at the top, you can find the initial theory of change that we developed, which is kind of the research base we grow out of. And then you can see, if you click our portfolio of efficacy, you can see all the different measures that we've done since launching to try to understand the impact that we're having. And I will also just say, because we're in a moment right now where there's a lot of criticism of educational technology. I think a lot of that criticism is way off base. I think some of it is very accurate. And I think the part that's accurate is, historically, I think educational technology as an industry has not focused enough on efficacy. And so I think if your listeners are, if you're for the teachers that are listening, if you're considering using an educational technology product, I'd encourage you to strongly look at and consider the research base supporting it, and if there is one, because oftentimes there's not. And it's very easy to fall in ed tech into just sort of like engaging tools that are fun for kids to use, but don't really do much in terms of driving outcomes. And I'd like to think short answer is not one of those tools. We really prioritize efficacy.
That's wonderful. At the airing of this, there's currently a program that has been around for, a decade and a half, and I'm not going to say the name of it, that is having some questions behind it at this time, because kids have been using it for years, sitting on the computers, working through these different things, supposedly getting mastery level at things, but there's not, from my understanding, I haven't really delved into it, a lot of research and studies and all the things that you just mentioned backing whether or not this program is truly successful, or if it's just, it's a computer program and it's at their pace and it's at their level, and
Yeah.
So hopefully.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, hopefully that it turns out that there is that information and this program has proven successful in improving students' abilities and skills, and that these lawsuits are for nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know, though.
Yeah, well, I'll name it. You're being very diplomatic, and I appreciate it. I think you're talking about iReady, and I don't.
I am, yes.
Sorry. No, it's worth naming. No, I think that's legitimate criticism, and I don't know enough about iReady to speak fluently on it publicly, but I will say this is something that we should be considering just education wide. It's really not just a technology problem. It's just about any initiative that we're putting into classrooms. Right. We should definitely be using research to inform best practice, and yes. It's really hard to do that well. Even great administrators that I've worked with and I've talked to folks about, it's like, oftentimes in education, we decide what we want to do, and then we bolt on, we go and we intentionally pick out research to sort of support what we already decided we wanted to do.
Yep.
And that's reversed. It needs to be, go to the research. What does it say as best practice of that research? Like, what's going to have the highest impact for my context? Because I do think effect size is deeply contextual in education, and then go from there. And yeah, I think that's an education-wide problem. That's not just an educational technology problem, and something that hopefully can improve outcomes, and we can use this moment to improve practice across the board. Yeah, we'll see. It's an interesting moment, especially for technology.
Yeah. And I'm going to sort of, I don't know that I'm really defending administrators in this, but it's not just an education bias. It is I want to be able to do this. And we have so many studies and so much research on all sides of any topic that, I mean, I think CEOs do it. I think, I think it's truly a cognitive bias. And so I think a lot of industries do it. It's not just happening in education, but it is happening. And I think that is something that we need to be aware of and be intentional with, that I am not supporting my bias, whichever direction, by seeking stuff that supports whichever side I'm on, no matter where that idea is falling. So thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important. And I think based on what I've seen, I think your program is going to improve children's understanding. And I think hopefully that a side effect, like I said, that is going to happen, is it's not just improving their writing, but it's improving their ability to slow down a little bit, to think things through, because you've mentioned multiple times, it's more about the process than the end product. Yes, the end product is important, but the process of being able to revise, being okay with revisions, which for a lot of students translates to not just providing revisions and support, but like, it's not a mistake. I talk about this frequently, that, Edison had over 1,000 different materials and things that he tried before finding the one that worked for the light bulb. Yeah. If he had looked at all of those other things and said, I failed, he would have quit, but because he said, okay, well, this doesn't work, toss that one out. All right, I'm going to grab something else, try something else. Nope, that one doesn't work, toss that one out, grab something, try something else. Yeah. We don't do that. We think, oh, I tried this and I failed, if there's any sort of negative feedback about it whatsoever. And I'm hoping that peer editing will increase people's self-esteem rather than decrease it by going, oh, they made comments. Well, they made comments to help us improve. And I'm saying this as a person that had, when I got feedback that it was negative when I was growing up, I did not do well with that, because it was like, oh, I should have just somehow been perfect at this to start with. Well, nobody's perfect at everything. That's what growing and learning is all about. But I think for a lot of people like myself, who grew up having a lot of irrational and anxious thinking, it would have hurt me to know, like, that motivation to do better was there. But then the second somebody would have told me, well, maybe you could have used this word and it would have enhanced it. Not that what you used was bad, but it could have enhanced it.
Right.
So go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I didn't mean to cut you off. You're saying so many things. I'm like, I have a lot of thoughts. No, I meant that as a compliment. I have a lot of thoughts, and I'm going to try to respond succinctly. First, kind of what you're talking about earlier, it's like, I think, to your point of confirmation bias and seeking out information that just kind of confirms what you wanted to do or believe anyway. I think dialectical thinking, which is the process of deliberately seeking out sources of information that hold a different view than what you believe, has always been critically important. I think it's in this new age of AI, but also um, all sorts of things, social media polarization, all these things. Like it's doubly important to seek out sources of information that hold a different perspective than what you have, just to challenge and deepen your own thinking. So I just wanted to make sure I say that before I forget. And then another piece I was thinking of was you're kind of reminding me of Carol Dweck's growth mindset research, which I think is really important for kids. It was really important for me and transformative when I found out about it, because I was like you. I was one of those kids that was like, if I got negative feedback or a bad grade or something, I took it as a sign that I was inherently stupid or something,
Right.
As opposed to an opportunity for growth. And really all that needs to change there is just your perspective. And so I'm hoping we can intentionally, with short answer, intentionally create experiences where we can coach kids through how to accept feedback, even when the feedback is challenging. Because I think it's critically important, and there's research to kind of support that. So I nerded out on feedback research for a very long time, and for a year when I was doing my master's. And there was a meta-analysis done in 1997 by researchers at Rutgers. Their last names are Kluger and Denisi. 1997. If you Google search that, people should be able to find it. And they looked at every piece of research on feedback that was conducted over the course of the 1900s. So it's like epic meta-analysis.
Right.
And they sorted and filtered it to only the ones that were high quality. And what they found were a lot of things, and we could talk about it for a long time. But the thing that's interesting is that in almost 2/5 of the studies, they found that feedback actually hurt learning. And it hurt learning because of what you're touching on and what I was kind of touching on just now. Like, kids have emotional reactions to it and they shut down, and they or they're like, oh yeah, I got a good grade. That means I understand it, so I don't need to worry about this. Boom, moving on. Even though you might. Yeah. So kind of there's multiple avenues to it, but it's a counterintuitive finding. I provided feedback and it hurt learning. What in the world? I thought feedback was like an important lever of improving student understanding. So it then becomes being intentional about how do you coach a kid through how to receive feedback and use it. That's the real tricky part. And I'm hoping that the experiences that we're helping create in classrooms with Short Answer are helping teachers do that. Because I think it's been something that has historically been underthought in classrooms, is like, I give them the feedback, but I don't really consider how are they experiencing that feedback and how are they using it and how are they interpreting it. So I'm hoping we can help with that, but it is an issue in education and has been for a long time. And will continue to be, really, even in this new world where AI can give you feedback in 2 seconds. What students choose to prioritize with that feedback and how they react to it is going to be just as challenging as it always has been. So we're going to have to be intentional about creating experiences to coach kids through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think that your program will do that based on what I saw. And I think we talked about it, but I do just want to make sure that if we haven't, we do, because I thought the part of, like coming down to one really well-written answer to that prompt. So did we talk about that? Because I know you talked about the flag with the ball and is that what you're referring to?
No, that's a different activity. So the one you're referring to is Battle Royale. So in that one, it uses comparative judgment-based peer feedback. So students submit their writing, teacher clicks begin feedback. Every student sees 2 anonymous pieces of peer writing. All of them are different, and they click the one they think is stronger. And what we're doing on the teacher screen then is whittling that down over the course of multiple rounds of voting to one exemplar response based on the class choice. And then the whole class reflects on that. So it's like, hooray, Adam had the top piece of writing. But what did Adam do well with that piece of writing? Let's talk about it. And you can choose that to be anonymous or not. But it's a very simple process of just whittling it down to one exemplar and then reflecting on the exemplar. And to your point of communicating a growth mindset to kids, something that I've seen our teachers do that I think is really cool is, okay, we did a battle royale. We selected this as the top response. We reflected on it. As an exit ticket, or maybe for homework, I want you to copy paste that response into a Google Doc, let's say, and you're going to revise it to make it even stronger. So even though we felt like this was a really great piece of writing, we could always still improve. And let's everybody take a turn, putting their individual spin on making this stronger. And that's really, really cool because, again, communicating growth mindset, but also now we're using a student's piece of work as the exemplar across the entire class, which I think is really cool to be able to tap into and kind of give kids some extra shine in the classroom. So yeah, that's Battle Royale, and that's on our free plan for teachers that might be listening. I'd encourage you to try it out.
Perfect. And that just hit on the last point that I wanted to get to before we close out for today is so they can go to your website, myshortanswer.com, and there they can reach out to you, or is it best that they go to info@myshortanswer.com in order to get the pricing and all of those other business components?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, we're a freemium tool, so you can sign up and use it for free. And the Battle Royale activity that I just described, that's free in perpetuity. So if that's a useful resource for your classroom, that's yours, and you can use it from here on out. If you are interested in the premium version of it, there's a plans and pricings page on our website you can check out, or you can email me at info@myshortanswer.com or just adam@myshortanswer.com. Both of those will go to me. And I'm happy to talk about it. But first, I would encourage you to, if you're a teacher listening, to just go sign up and try it and see if it's a good fit for your classroom. And you get access to premium for the first 40 days, so you can see if it's a good fit, and then you'll fall off of premium, but you can continue to use the free plan. So hopefully it's a valuable resource for your classroom.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, I like the concept, and I wanted to cover your contact information before we ran out of time, but I really do like the concept of, especially when you're writing, it can always be different or improved. There is no absolutely, this is the perfect, nobody can ever improve upon this aspect of writing. Because again, I think that is going to help people just in there like, oh, okay, here we've picked this exemplar one, but yet we can still make it even better or different. And so I really appreciated that piece. And I did just want to throw out that you are on X. So it is x.com/myshortanswer is how they can find you there. And again, just to cover info@myshortanswer.com or adam@myshortanswer.com. And then of course the website is myshortanswer.com. Adam, you have 1 minute. Is there anything left that you want to say or final thoughts that you want to end on?
Oh man. I just would say I really appreciate you having me on. We were across the booth from each other at the Illinois Reading Council conference in Springfield, Illinois a couple months ago. And it's really cool to have someone come over and find out about our work and just invite me on and be willing to share it with your audience. That's very generous, and I appreciate it. So I hope people are just as likely to check out the awesome work that you're doing as they are to check out Short Answer and our work at myshortanswer.com. So just thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been my pleasure. This hour flew by. I looked up and I went, oh, okay. I got to start bringing this to a close because your insight, your information, your knowledge, it's fantastic. And I really do appreciate writing was not a subject that I taught heavily as a special education teacher. I taught all subjects, all grade levels. But my students, we didn't get as much out of their writing as I know that this is going to help students develop their writing skills so much more. And I think this would have been something very helpful to me. I didn't teach high school. I taught middle school as well as elementary. So as we mentioned before we came on, elementary K through 2 isn't really where this applies. It's really third grade through high school. And I can definitely see this being a tremendous benefit to teachers and giving that immediate feedback, which is that immediacy that our society loves, but it also slows it down a little bit. Like, okay, we're not finished. It's not a once and done. We're going to go through and not just long form essays, but we can do this with short form essays or even just short answer questions that have citing evidence or details from the writings or the readings from the lesson. So, Adam, thank you so much. Yeah. I very much appreciate you and what you are doing. And thank you to your wife for being there with you and supporting you and helping you develop this. And to all the audience, thank you for joining us. And make sure that you like and subscribe. And remember, we know who we are, but not who we will be. Have a great week.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Hey, parents and teachers, are you tired of IEP meetings that feel like a battle? Let's put an end to the tension and create a collaborative, calm, and respectful environment together. Shelley Keno, your go-to IEP consultant, can transform your meetings into positive and productive experiences. With Shelley Keno, your child is her top priority, your voice is heard, and you become confident. Shelley Keno is making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. Visit www.shelleykeno.com for more information and set up your free 20-minute consultation today. That's shelleykeno.com, SHELLEYKENOW.